Heath, what you don't know is I will call you at 2 in the morning for music. Absolutely. Because I do wake up at 2 in the morning. Oh, always such a blessing to come here and see y'all. Thank you for coming and choosing to be in community with one another, right? There's so many different things you could be doing right now, and yet you choose us. We choose one another, and that just always just makes me so happy. So thank you, as always. I am continuing our series on the power of resilience. And did anyone notice I put everything on the sermon notes? Yay. Okay, y'all did. Perfect. I'm so glad you did. Thank you. And I did everything I've done so far. And tomorrow you will see new sermon notes from today. What I love about them is it reminds you what the practice is, right? Because it's hard to just take it in and leave and know. But yeah. So the title is Rooted Together, We Count on Each Other. So it's really about connection today. And I do want to review what we've been doing. And the authors are psychologists. And what they say is that we need to create this resilient mindset and come to life with this sense of resiliency. And what they're getting us and what they hope that we do is know that it's not just because a tragedy is going to show up, but rather if we always live with a resilient mindset, we're going to come to our lives with a better sense of just really peace, right? And safety. And that's really what they're talking about. And security and knowingness. And it, as I've said every Sunday in this series, it comes together so perfectly with our third principle, this idea of we choose and co-create our lives, and we do that by surrendering to that divine mind and knowing that we can create a life through that divine mind, becoming aware of our thoughts and not punishing ourselves for the thoughts that aren't working for us, right? We let ourselves release them, but know that we can use those thoughts and pray and be an affirmation to create a life that actually works for us and works for everyone. So that is what I love about this power of resiliency, is it's actually giving us, what's the word, those tools to do this principle. So what we have talked about so far, and it has really grown me, let me tell you, and I've shared with y'all how it has. The first thing is become aware of your negative scripts and rewrite them. And what I have said to y'all is that I have been noticing mine, and every time I do, what I do is I notice, and I know you notice, is whether you know it or not, they're driving your bus, right? Because they can be so powerful. And every time we write them and we rewrite them, we're no longer a passenger. We're actually the driver. So I encourage you to continue. Become aware of those negative scripts. And you don't beat yourself up for it. You're like, oh, okay, I hear you. You've been saying that a lot. Let's rewrite that. That's what that is. To become stress hardy. This is the idea that when we come to stress, it's so easy to feel defeated, right? It's so easy to feel like, what do I do now? I'm not going to get through this. But what they're asking is like, rather than feel defeated, know that what stress is it's an opportunity to learn something new. It's an opportunity to find a solution. Who comes to stress that way? Yeah. Right? I don't. I come to stress and I get impatient and I yell at people around me. Unfortunately, those people around me know that. So that's what it says. Become stress hardy. Also, become empathetic. And as you know, what they said about that is, as you go through life, look at life through somebody else's shoes. And when you do, you can become empathetic to whatever it is. And what they say is it enhances the quality of our relationships. Now, the last time I was here, we talked about two tools, and one was communicating effectively. And that means, as you know, communicating isn't just speaking, it's also listening. Listening with kindness, and then speaking clearly and deliberatively. And then accepting oneself and others. And it means that we have an ability to accept ourselves with all of our thoughts and all of our feelings. Just accept it. Accept all of it, whatever it is. Because the more we can accept ourselves exactly as we are, the more we can accept others exactly as they are. Because what happens is what you don't accept of yourself, this is what Carl Jung says, it becomes the shadow self. And that's the shadow self that then we will point at others and say, oh, they, rather than, oh, me, right? That's what you do with that self. So we accept ourselves, all of it, whatever it is, so that we can accept another. So this morning, what we're going to focus on is connections and the quality of connectedness. Now, it's become evident from this work that building resiliency and using these tools is a choice, right? It's a choice. And that's what I love about Unity and this path, the spiritual path. It's not a path of me standing here and telling you how to live, right? Or about each other telling each other how to live. That's not what it is. This path is a path of self-responsibility. And it means constantly using these principles in a ceaseless kind of way and saying what's coming up in my life and how can I use this principle? How can I stay connected to all of life? How can I live a life of integrity? How can I live a life that actually works for me? How can I live authentically, right? That's what this path is about, this authentic living. And so this resiliency, it just gives us that foundation to keep doing that work, and it gives us tools. And so to me, it's very obvious that this piece is so much about connection, right? Connection to one another, to community, for us to the divine, right? Creating that connection. And notice that one of the things they talked about is for children to become resilient, they need a charismatic adult. So they need connection to become resilient. The idea is we all need that to become resilient, right? And when you're a charismatic adult, you offer unconditional love. You offer encouragement. You offer support. And when you do it for children, guess what? They'll immediately just do it for themselves. Amen. They'll immediately say, wow, I made a mistake. What is mine to do now? Because the voice in their head isn't going to be the harsh voice that maybe some of us got of, you made a mistake, right? It's just going to be, oh, all right, what do I do now? That's what the charismatic adult is, and that's what we're learning to do for ourselves, is be that for ourselves, a charismatic adult. So for me, the connection piece, it's like, well, of course connection is a piece of it, right? And what they're asking us to do is look at the quality of connection. That's what they want us to do. They say connection is a life force that involves a mutual give and take, a high level of trust, caring, openness, and a sense of security and safety. Wow, that's what they say. Take a breath, right? That's a high calling. That's a really high calling. Offering that sense of safety, and again, you have to give it to yourself before you can give it to another. So you have to be a safe place to land before you can be a safe place to land. That's a high calling, right? The other thing that they mention about connection is that we are in connection always, or the best way is to be in connection to something bigger than ourselves, right? So relationships, friendships, obviously spiritual community, something bigger than ourselves. That's connection. So connection is very much already in this idea of resiliency. So what I want to offer for us as our affirmation is something really simple, and that's just, in my connections, I find resilience. And just breathe that in. In my connections, I find resilience. One more time. In my connections, I find resilience. And now take that in. Let those words be with you. And take a moment to just, review the Rolodex of your mind and even notice about who those people are, what that is, what connections are for you, and how you feel in those connections. Because the idea is that in connection, we feel a sense of safety, a sense of belonging, a sense of feeling love, a sense of knowing peace, a sense of coming home to ourselves. That's the idea of connection. That's beautiful, isn't it? In my connections, I find resilience. And it's obvious, isn't it, that connection is the antidote to loneliness, right? It's obvious. And that's something I always talk about, is how loneliness and isolation is one of the largest epidemics in our country. And that always breaks my heart. That always breaks my heart. And that's what I always want this community to be, that antidote to loneliness, that antidote to isolation. And the piece of that is it's also very vulnerable act to show up, isn't it? I remember so many times in my life when I was stuck under a blanket and I couldn't show up. Just getting a shower and getting out the door felt like too much. I felt too raw. I just wanted to hide. I could not be in connection. Yeah, it's true. And so I want you to know that if you ever feel that way, I'm the place, this is the place. Please know that. I've been there, I've experienced it. In showing up, we heal. That's the point. It's taken me a while to get that. In showing up for one another, we heal. So what I want to offer is, first, I looked at Parker Palmer. I want to talk about him. So I want to look at what Parker Palmer calls circles of trust, because it's in the circle of trust that we can create connection. And I want to see how that shows up in a Hebrew Bible story, and that's the story of the book of Ruth. It's one of my favorite stories. I remember it was my sister that said, "You've got to read the book of Ruth. It's a short one, and it's a good one." And she's so right. It's such a beautiful story. And then I want to look at how we see it in the natural world. And I don't have a science background, but I'm going to do my best to explain how trees create connection with one another. And I know Reverend Vita was married to an arborist, so I'm sure she knows the details of all of this. And I've shared with y'all how much I find belonging and home and peace in trees. So to find out the way that they come together in connection and they are socially connected to one another is no shock. And it just brings tears to my eyes. So first, let me talk about Parker Palmer. My spouse, Thomas, had a medical procedure this week. He's fine. He's all good. And I had to, go with him and be there. And I always have a book with me. I can't ever be anywhere without a book. And I could not find the Power of Resilience book, but I found this one and I grabbed it. And I am so glad I did, because talk about divine synchronicity, right? That is just always how it works. If you don't know Parker Palmer, he's an educator. He's well known as an educator, an author, and an activist. And for him, it's always about creating spiritual community and creating community, period. So he talks about circles of trust, which obviously it's like, oh my gosh, well, that's the connection, right? That's how we create connection. We have to be trusting. And he talks about how, and y'all will recognize this, how we are divided selves. And he says, we must become conscientious objectors to the forces that put us at war with ourselves, assaulting our identity and integrity, violating the sanctity of our souls. At war with ourselves. Who does that sound like? Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Remember what he says is we are at civil war with ourselves. And keep that in mind. If you're at a civil war with yourself, what are you going to do with another person? Be at war. It's the very same thing. So the idea is this is what needs to be healed, right? And we can only do it together. And then he says, we come together in small groups to create safe space for the soul so that we can support each other on the journey toward an undivided life. Isn't that beautiful? So so this idea of the circle of trust is, it's a space between us that honors the soul. The idea reminds us that healing doesn't come from fixing each other. as much as we want to, right? That's not what we're here to do. It comes from, to this, showing up, listening deeply, holding space for one another's truth. May not be yours, but it's there, so I'm going to hold space for it. In those moments, we begin to remember who we are. We begin to feel steady again, not because everything is solved, but because someone is with us. Someone's with us. Someone's our companion, right? So, as you know, so much of the world does not know how to do that, right? Our culture rushes in to fix, advise, control. I mean, watch a commercial, right? And it's going to tell us, you need this, you need that. You're not whole as you are. You need to be fixed. Yeah, I notice it now as I get older, all the things I'm supposed to be putting on my face and my hair, and because I don't look good the way I am, apparently. But that's what the commercials are telling me. That's what they're telling me. I'm not good the way I look. Yeah. So there you go. But I'm going to say wholeness begins where we are allowed to tell the truth of our lives in the presence of love, and that happens in connection with the divine and with one another. Safe space to land, a circle of trust. That is my hope of what we're building here. That's always my prayer. That's what we build here. So I want to look at, I told you I would look at Ruth and Naomi's story, and I'm looking at it because if there was a circle of trust and a sacred bond, it's between these two women. And I will review the story. It shows us, again, that resilience is not a solitary venture. We need one another. So if you don't know their story, it's in the book of Ruth. It's in the Hebrew scriptures. And Naomi is married and has 2 sons. And they're in a land, and is it Judah? I used to know this. Yes, it's a land of Judah, was having a famine. So they need to leave. So they go to Moab, which is 50 miles east, and it's called No Man's Land. That's important. The Israelites and the Moabites did not like each other. They do not like each other. But you have a family that's in famine, so they need to go there. So they go there. And very soon, her husband dies. Elimelech dies. And then she still has 2 sons, and those 2 sons marry Moabite women. That's a really big deal. And those women are Orpah, not Oprah, but Orpah, Orpah and Ruth. So they are there together and don't have children, and then the sons die. So now you have Naomi by herself as a widow with 2 daughters-in-law that are widows, right? And in this time, this meant immediate poverty. They're widows. That's what it meant, immediate. Keep in mind that this is a time of living in a patriarchal structure. They don't own homes. They don't have access to health care, finances, unless they're attached to a man. Even though biblical says, that they need to take care of widows, it's not always what happens. So anyway, this is the story. And so Naomi, she hears that the famine is lifted in her home country, and she says to her daughters-in-law, I'm going to go. Y'all need to stay, but I'm going to go. And Orpah decides that she's going to stay, but Ruth makes a very different decision. And so she says, she has this lifelong pledge to Naomi, and what she says, is where you go, I will go. Y'all know this. I know y'all know this. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Is that not beautiful? What I love about that story is Ruth's just undying love. And the other piece of it is, keep in mind that these 2 groups are sworn enemies, right? But it's this idea is like, whatever your God is my God. There's only one God anyway, which is also so beautiful. And so you have this story that's a story about heartbreak, right? It's a story about famine. It's not a story of triumph, right? bereavement, uncertainty, and yet this is what she chooses, right? The idea is resilience doesn't show up in toughness. Resilience shows up through the connection and through the choice to be loving, a loving companion. I just love that story. It is just so beautiful to me. So it arrives as a promise, this idea of connection and resilience. It arrives as one woman refusing to let another woman walk through desolation by herself. Isn't that beautiful? Ruth's strength is real, but it is not the strength of isolation. Naomi's endurance is real, but it is not sustained by willpower alone. Their survival is bound up with one another. Do you get that? Our survival is bound up with one another. That's so beautiful. Hard, but beautiful, right? Hard, but beautiful. So last is the communion of trees. And I will do my best to talk about science or the natural world. I love trees, but I don't like mosquitoes. So anyway, when we look at the natural world, we see how much connection is needed for survival. So, since Charles Darwin, who was a 19th century naturalist, we have generally thought of trees as striving as disconnected loners, competing for water, nutrients, and sunlight. The winners shading out the losers and sucking them dry. The timber industry in particular sees forests as wood-producing systems and battlegrounds for survival of the fittest. Okay, that was an old way. Now there is so much, there's a scientific evidence that refutes that idea. It shows instead that trees of the same species are communal. Isn't that beautiful? They form alliances with trees of other species. They become cooperative and interdependent. Isn't that that's interdependence? So there is this one man, he's German, Peter Wolben. I know you know who he is, Reverend Vita. And what he says is that what you really can see is this wood wide web, meaning that all the trees here and every forest that is not too damaged are connected through this underground fungal networks. Thank you. I need Jara up here. She teaches this. Fungal networks underneath. And so as far as what I know is what happens is they offer nutrients to one another, right? I'm keep looking at Shara. They offer nutrients to one another. So like if one isn't doing well, they will send like sugar to that one, right? Yeah, they send things to that. It's beautiful. This what they do. They also will. This idea is they will suckle their young. So this network is a lifeline. So when some are lacking sunlight to photosynthesize, they survive because big trees, including their parents, pump sugar into their roots through the network. And he likes to say that mother trees suckle their young, which both stretches a metaphor and gets the point across. Isn't that beautiful? Who knew, right? I mean, because we look at them and we think, oh, they're all just out there alone. No, it's a social network. There's a connection there. That's how they survive. And then he says he found this beech stump in a forest. And when he scraped the surface with his penknife, he found that the stump was still green with chlorophyll. And he's like, there was only one explanation. That is the surrounding beaches were keeping it alive by pumping sugar to it through the network. When beaches do this, he says, they remind me of elephants. They are reluctant to abandon their dead, especially when it's a big, old, revered matriarch. Ruth and Naomi. She's not going to abandon her. She's not going to abandon her. She knows abandoning her isn't going to help her survive, right? That's what we do with one another. We are that network, those social beings of we needing one another. So, What is resilience? Here's what I know right now, today. I crave spiritual life, the life that is in communion with the divine and with spiritual community. In this way of life, prayer matters, encouragement matters, meals shared and grief matter, quiet companionship matters, a phone call matters, a hand on a shoulder matters, the unseen ways that we carry one another matters. We are the hands and the feet of the one. Each of us is a channel for grace. What is resilience? It isn't pretending we are invulnerable. It isn't about living an inauthentic life. It isn't about bare knuckling it through life. It is trusting that when life strips us bare, God, Spirit, the One, holds us when we surrender, and our community of loved ones hold us when we allow. Resilience is knowing that despair does not get the final word because love keeps showing up. Resilience holds the belief that even when we cannot see the whole pattern, there are roots beneath us. Those roots keep us connected. Those roots are our spiritual foundation. The question for us this morning is not merely how do I become resilient? The question is also how do we become a people through whom resilience is possible? How do we become a circle of trust for one another? How do we create a spiritual community where each of us is honored, where truth can be spoken, where grief is not rushed, where silence is not feared, where no one is abandoned in the field? How do we become like a living forest, deeply rooted, quietly sharing strength, sheltering life beyond what the eye can see? May we release the myth of the solitary strong one. May we receive the gift of faithful companionship. May we become for one another a network of grace so deep, so steady, so alive that when the wind rises, we do not merely endure alone, we stand together. Amen.